Good morning, and thank you for having me to this event, and thank you to the panel, and I'm very happy to be here. But my name is Russ Conklin. I'm with the U.S. Department of Energy, and I'm also with the International Smart Grid Action Network, which is a multilateral initiative on smart grids. And wearing those kind of two hats, I'm going to have a kind of a two-part presentation today. One wearing my Department of Energy hat, talking about some activities in the United States, and part of it also wearing my ISGAN hat, the International Smart Grid Action Network, to talk about that. So I'm going to start off talking about a little bit about the motivation for smart grids in the U.S., talk about some of our demonstration and deployment activities under our stimulus bill from a couple years ago, and then talk about the International Smart Grid Action Network. But I should actually note that I could easily fill up to 2 hours talking about the things that we have going on in the United States alone. I will not do so, of course, but this is only a small slice of the activities that we have going on. So for a little bit of context, the North American electric power grids, actually 3 grids. We have 3 separate power grids in the United States right now that have very minimal interconnections between them. Over 3,000 utilities, 17,000 power plants, $1 trillion in assets. I should add that each of our distribution networks are regulated primarily at the state level, not the federal level. So the federal government has very little authority over the regulation of distribution networks. We have, I believe, 140 control areas across the United States. So it's a very complex and complex system. You mentioned the role of electric power in development. Well, the National Academies of Engineers called the electric power system in North America the greatest invention of the 20th century. But it is an aging system, so there are definite needs. And this has been recognized by our administration here. President Obama, who will have his second inauguration this coming Monday, made a modernized electric system a key part of his blueprint for a secure energy future. In addition, our Secretary Chu, who's a Nobel laureate physicist, noted that you cannot build a 21st century economy with a 20th century electricity system. So both within the administration broadly and the U.S. government broadly, and also especially within the Department of Energy, grid modernization is a key focus. So, and there's a document there you see in the kind of various, might be small in the print, but called a policy framework for the 21st century grid. This document is available at smartgrid.gov, which is our web portal for U.S. government smart grid activities. So the vision for the future electricity grid, which comes from the DOE's grid tech team, is to enable a seamless, cost-effective electricity system from generation all the way down to end use, capable of meeting the clean energy demands and capacity requirements of this century, the power quality needs of this century, while allowing consumer participation and electricity use as desired. So create a flexible, resilient system that can support significant scale-up of clean energy technologies, 80% by 2035, according to the President's goals, that allows consumer participation and choice, including distributed generation, demand response, and electrification of transportation, electric vehicles, and better energy efficiency. More holistically designed systems that include hybrids of AC and DC systems and other new technologies. Of course, this will probably be a part of anyone's presentation from any country in the world. Global competitiveness and leadership is a old standard. And also more reliable, secure, and resilient systems and processes. One of the challenges we have in the United States is we have frequent storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, otherwise. And those storms often take out significant portions of our electric power grid for significant periods of time, and that is a tremendous challenge. Under the ISGAN umbrella, we did an assessment of different countries in ISGAN's motivating driver for smart grid. And the things that came up from this came from a survey of U.S. government personnel. And the motivating drivers that came up most frequently were system efficiency improvements, reliability improvements, power restoration improvements. You get a little bit of a theme here. Enabling consumer choice and participation, enhancing resiliency and regulatory compliance, including compliance with clean electricity standards and renewable portfolio standards. So the key technologies then correspond to that: distribution management systems, outage management systems, advanced metering infrastructure, renewables integration, demand response, and cybersecurity, et cetera. So that kind of gives you a little bit of the background of what motivates us to pursue smart grids in the United States. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the activity the United States has been funding, some of the investments we've been making. In 2007, Congress passed the Energy Independence and Security Act, which authorized two programs: a Smart Grid Investment Grant Program and a Smart Grid Regional Demonstration Program. As is typical with things that Congress does, they authorized the program, but they didn't provide the funding. So those programs sat around for a couple of years until 2009, when the economic crisis and the stimulus bill. This was called the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. And in that bill, they provided the funding for those two programs, as well as other grid modernization programs. In total, $4.5 billion of stimulus funds to help modernize the grid. The majority of this went to deployment projects under the investment grant program. Roughly $600 million of this went to demonstration projects, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a moment, as well as then workforce training, interconnection planning and transmission level analysis, and of course, all important interoperability standards. And some of you may have heard of the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel process that brings together a lot of companies to identify gaps in standards. So the investment grants represent the lion's share of the funding. Roughly $3.5 billion US dollars from the federal government invested that were then matched by almost $4.5 million of private sector funds. These are deployments of 99 projects in total deploying current technologies, currently available technologies. These are deploying, advanced meters, other technologies. We'll actually come back to this in a moment. I realize that's my next slide. Supporting manufacturing, purchasing, installation of these technologies. The idea is to accelerate the markets, accelerate the deployment of these technologies, and also prove their value. The recipients of these technologies were a wide variety, ranging from investor-owned utilities, private sector utilities, to municipal utilities, to electric co-ops that were actually owned by, in rural areas, owned by their customers, among others. We also had the Smart Grid Demonstration Program, which is ongoing. This is less funding and far fewer projects, only 32 in total. But these are the ideas that it's supposed to demonstrate emerging technologies, including energy storage, new architectures, new transactional models. These are supposed to be more integrative in nature and bringing together new ideas, and then that should be scalable and replicable in other environments. And this had a wider range of recipient types in a way, because we had utilities, manufacturers, and others. But in many of these projects, you might have multiple recipient types represented in a single project. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on the Smart Grid investment grants at the moment, because they are a little bit further along. Now, don't quote the numbers on this slide, but I want to emphasize that although a majority of the technology units that were deployed are being deployed are advanced metering infrastructure, a wide range of technologies are actually being deployed, including phasor measurement units, smart transformers, automated substations, load control devices, in-home display units, electric charging units, electric vehicle charging units, excuse me. And I don't want to, and this really only captures a slice of it, because on a different side of DOE's house, in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, where we have a vehicle technologies program, a building technologies program, and programs in that area, not just focused on grid, there was also a large number of investments for those particular technologies that have impact on the smart grid. We're a little bit further than halfway through the deployment of these technologies to date. You can see that we have roughly half of the phaser measurement units are of, almost 800 PMUs have been deployed. Most of the automated switches, a significant number of the automated capacitors, and probably about 2/3 of the smart meters have been deployed. So this is an ongoing process. We're still in the middle of it, and we're learning a lot. And since these were public investments and major public investments in these technologies, one of the key aspects of this program is the analysis, getting the data that can help us understand the technologies better, the impacts, the benefits, the cost of these technologies better. And so our analytical approach is to really look at what the technologies are, what do they do, how they do that, what's the benefit that results, and then how do you monetize that benefit and make it and express it as a monetary value. The focus within the Smart Grid Investment Grant Program is on three primary areas, which is advanced metering infrastructure, of course, which a lot of people unfortunately conflate and make that the smart grid altogether, which is not true. Distribution automation, and then definitely some transmission system applications as well. So our definition of smart grid is not just solely focused on the distribution end of the scheme. We actually look at transmission as well. At this point, we have developed a lot of frameworks for measuring and assessing the benefits and cost. This has been a tremendous amount of work done in the past couple of years by by colleagues at DOE that were working from a blank page in many respects when they started, and working with Electric Power Research Institute, a number of consultants and others. They have done tremendous work in developing frameworks to look at these and analyze the results. And at this point, we are just in the middle of our metric reporting and analysis, and we're just getting started on understanding the impacts of these technologies. But I'd like to highlight three areas very quickly. One that's been showing a lot of promise is advanced volt-var control to improve energy efficiency. We have roughly a quarter of the projects the Smart Grid Investment Grant projects are deploying this volt-var control, and roughly half of those are actually applying conservation voltage reduction to reduce peak load. And that has shown a lot of promise for very low cost to reduce peak with very little, just reducing the voltage by using the improved sensors of the advanced metering infrastructure and other systems to be able to really understand what your endpoint voltage is and be able to reduce a little bit and reduce your energy that needs to be transmitted. Another key technology is synchrophaser technology. As I mentioned, we are deploying roughly 800 through the Recovery Act. And now the challenge is that we're going to have all this data coming in from all these synchrophasers. What do we do with it? How do you make this into actionable information that's useful? So, for example, the Midwest Independent System Operator has deployed 161 of these devices along their 50,000-mile system. And they are actually going to start making this data available to their system operators coming this April for improved modeling, for improved after-the-fact analysis of events and disturbances, and continue to improve the modeling and the forecasting for the systems. Last, and this is kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum, much of the smart grid involves improved demand response and improved interaction with consumers. Well, obviously a consumer is not a computer and has behaviors, so one of the things we're trying to do better is understand consumer behavior and what are the tariff structures, the information sharing designs that will actually improve consumer response to different programs. But I should emphasize that this is all just a down payment on a modernized electric grid. I mean, the $8 billion roughly from the Smart Grid Investment Grant Program is only a drop in the bucket of what estimates have said that we're going to need to really modernize the U.S. electric grid. I love this chart because it gives you a sense of how big the scale is. EPRI is estimated between $338 and $476 billion US dollars by 2030 to modernize the grid. The Brattle Group has estimated almost $900 billion by 2030. The Smart Grid Investment Grant Program, if you include the U.S. government portion and the private sector portion, was $8. So there's a long way to go on this front. For more on the U.S. government smart grid reports and updates, I encourage you to visit smartgrid.gov. Really simple to remember, smartgrid.gov. It has, you can look at any of the Recovery Act projects there, get the build metrics for them, and as the analytical reports start being published, you can find them all there. So I'm going to put my other hat on for a moment, and I realize I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to go very quickly through ISGAN, because I think, because both the United States and India are actively engaged in this multilateral initiative. So what and why is ISGAN? ISGAN is a mechanism for bringing high-level government attention and action to accelerate the development and deployment of smarter electricity grids around the world. What does that mean? We're trying to build a better global understanding of what smart grids mean. We're trying to address gaps in knowledge and tools internationally. And ultimately, our goal is to really accelerate smart grid deployment. We want to build on the momentum, on the knowledge that's being created by those investments, like the smart grid investments that I mentioned for the United States. We were originally launched as an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial, which I'll describe in a moment, and we were organized as a task-shared IA implementing agreement. So we have 22 participants currently, including the Government of India and U.S. Department of Energy. We have 2 regions that we are still trying to get better participation from. That's Africa and South America. And our community includes representatives of governments, national labs, research institutions, transmission and distribution system operators, power generators, and more. As I said, we're trying to extend our membership to other regions as well, so we have several invitations out. And we are really pursuing cooperation with the Global Smart Grid Federation, which we have the chair of the board here that's on this panel, as well as the APEC Energy Smart Communities Initiative. And I should mention that NATO from Japan actually has a dual hat, because they are participants in ISGAN and through the Smart Communities Alliance, part of the Global Smart Grid Federation. Now, we are part of the Clean Energy Ministerial, and what that is it brings together energy ministers from major economies around the world, including the United States and India, to accelerate the transition to clean energy technologies through high-level policy dialogue, technical cooperation through initiatives, and engagement with the private sector and other stakeholders. And this high-level policy dialogue is usually achieved through an annual meeting of the ministers. And this year, the meeting is going to be here in Delhi in April. And there's going to actually be an innovation forum, among other things. So there should be a lot of news coming out about the Clean Energy Ministerial meeting here in April very, very shortly. But if you put together these almost 24 countries, and you have greater than 90% of global clean energy investment and greater than 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So a large part of the climate change problem, a large part of the clean energy challenge are represented by the countries that participate in the SEM. It's a great group and a great process. And so ISGAN is one of 13 initiatives under that process that run the gamut from electric vehicles, industrial efficiency, super efficient equipment and appliance deployment, which India has been very active in through the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, among others. Of course, ISGAN, Clean Energy Solutions Center for policy guidance. So we have there's a broad range of really interesting activities on there. Now, I'm going to try to accelerate a little bit because I realize I'm out of time, but the current ISGAN work portfolio is to concentrate on 4 foundational projects to develop tools and methodologies for understanding smart grid internationally, recognizing that many grid applications are really focused on local environments and local conditions. So that's annexes 1 through 3 there, the Global Smart Grid Inventory, Smart Grid Case Studies, Benefit Cost Analysis, and Toolkits. Annex 4 is knowledge sharing by design. It's got a terrible name, Synthesis of Insights for Decision Makers, but it's really knowledge sharing by design. How do we share knowledge about this? How do we develop information tools that are useful? And then we have 2 newer projects. A Smart Grid International Research Facility Network, which is focused on cooperation in that niche between R&D and technology commercialization to develop testing protocols that will inform standards development processes. And Power and T&D Systems, which is an exercise to look at the vision for the future transmission and distribution grids. I'm going to skip through these slides and just focus on some recent and upcoming events. As I mentioned, ISGAN meets the executive committee in which Mr. Sanjeev Kumar is the representative from India and I'm the representative from the United States. We meet semi-annually. We meet next in Moscow in March, excuse me. Of course, the Clean Energy Ministerial is here in April. And then we have a range of workshops from our various annexes that are ongoing. So there's a broad range of activities underway to develop methodologies, develop tools, highlight existing tools, to assess opportunities, to develop white papers and other knowledge sharing. ISGAN has got a very broad range of activities, and we're very pleased that India is a part of it. We have a number of resources I'd like to point out to you right now, and hopefully we'll distribute this presentation afterwards, including the ISGAN website, ia-isgan.org, the Clean Energy Ministerial website. We're starting an online smart grid glossary. That's a wiki, so anyone can edit it, but it's a great platform that is content poor at the moment, so I encourage folks to feel free, like Wikipedia, to improve that. And with that, I know I've far exceeded my time, so I'll thank you, and of course, take any questions. I'll be here all day, so if you don't have questions after the panel, then I'll take questions later. Thank you very much.